discussing the question of the environment. At Orange Capital Partners, we're highly invested in Tesla, not because Tesla is doing something good for the environment. It's because Tesla wants to decarbonize transport and energy. Decarbonizing transport and energy might have good effects for the environment, or it might not. But that's not the point. The point is that solving the environment problem is a bad problem. It's not a problem we want to solve because it's not clear what that means. Decarbonizing transport and energy is a very clear problem, and we think it's a good problem. We might be wrong about that, but we think it's a good problem because it solves a couple of big problems. One is we don't burn fossil fuels that have been accumulating for hundreds of millions of years. We don't create corruption and centralized governments and things like that, just namely Russia, or we don't help create those types of governments by diversifying our energy sources, and by decarbonizing energy, we hopefully can diversify. Now, of course, we could also be stuck in a sort of even worse situation where we depend on one or two materials, and then it's the same thing again, and we have Vladimir Putin or somebody else holding us hostage instead of oil and gas just with those materials. The point here is, though, with the spirit of David Deutsch, that we just want to use creativity and knowledge creation towards a better path forward, and decarbonizing energy is the first step. It might work, it might not work, but it's worth trying, and this is what we're really trying to do. So decarbonizing energy is very much like going to Mars. It's a very, very big goal, and it might actually have very bad consequences. We don't know. But as a human race, as an investment company that allocates resources to projects, we think that this is worth our while. This is not even on podcast. It's May 18, 2022. This is Krim Delco. This is the second episode of today. So we're still down 43% for the year. The market's down 18.6%, excuse me. And we're underperforming by 24.4%. The drawdown is driven by a massive sell-off in the market today. Again, it's been a zigzag, but today we had a sort of capitulation of retail in the US, Target, Walmart yesterday, Target today. We're probably going to see some bad numbers from Costco also. The point here is that people are spending less, people are hoarding money, people are concerned about inflation. All these things are showing in the numbers, and we are most likely already in a recession. So those are the revelations of today. It's not good, it's not bad, it is what it is. And we think that given all of that, the most likely trajectory going forward is further sell-offs in the markets until fundamentals start creeping in, until buyers start coming back. When fundamentals start creeping in, maybe M&A kicks in, something like you. Typically, M&A actually doesn't kick in. Bottoms of recessions are usually when people get fired from jobs, when we hear a reversal, let's say, of what Apple's doing with their employees, saying that it's indefinite now, that people basically don't have to go back to the office. Those are things which are sort of signs of a lax labor market. When the labor market becomes very difficult from the labor supply, meaning from the employee's perspective, when they go back to work, no questions asked, that's sort of when recessions start bottoming out. And we're not there yet, unfortunately. So this is one of the signals that is worth looking at. When people start being concerned about either keeping their jobs or getting a new job, that's when it really bottoms out. And I just want to say this before I go into the conversation of the environment, which is the actual episode here. Recessions are good. They fix the economy. They get the fat out of the economy, but they're terrible for the youth. The reason they're terrible for the youth is because the established workforce keeps the youth away from the job market through policies. For example, what's happening right now with COVID is a convoluted way to keep the youth out of the workforce, because if you can't go to work in person, you can't learn, and therefore you're less valuable, and an established worker is more valuable and cannot be fired as easy as if you bring in young people. So this is a very good example of how the tension between young, new talent and the established workforce is being played out, in this case with COVID. In other cases, it's, let's say, things like minimum wage, and all these things have a good, maybe a good idea behind it, but fundamentally, they're hurting the youth. And this whole COVID policy, if you can't go to the office, If you can't learn from older people, more than senior people, then how can you become more valuable? Contact with other people, and particularly with experienced people. So not being able to share this experience in a person-to-person basis, in our view, is one of the biggest drawbacks that we're facing right now with all this COVID stuff. And it's going to cost us in the future. So the companies that can survive this now and keep people engaged and happy and creative together and teach people how to work together, which is even more important. So the group work, the leadership of in-person learning and in-person cooperation, all of these things are so much more efficient than if we do it remotely. And for the people who can still do this, they will be the leaders of tomorrow. Now let's get to the conversation about the environment. I just want to point this out. I've heard a few interviews, seen a few articles recently, and also in light of Tesla being kicked out of the ESG S&P index, which is, to say the least, ridiculous. But I don't even want to go into that conversation. Just in light of all of this, let's talk about the environment. The environment is a bad problem to solve in a Popperian way. So what is a bad problem? It's a problem that is bad to solve because it's not clear what it is. It's as simple. What is the environmental problem? It's not clear, and therefore it's being used by everybody for their own purpose. It's a little bit like solving the COVID problem. What is the COVID problem? We don't want to ever be infected by a virus again. We don't want to have to commute to work. We want to increase the budget for bureaucrats in the health department. We want to give local police more power in terms of lockdowns. What exactly is the COVID problem? And it's not clear, and that's why it's so dangerous. In a sense, problems that are not clear, in our view, are just not going to be on the right path. And we as investors also don't want to invest in problems or in solutions to problems that are bad. This is the bottom line here. So the environment is a bad problem. Now, decarbonizing transport and energy, that's a good problem because it's very clear what it is. It just means that we want to use energy sources that are not carbon and build an infrastructure for energy and transport that is not carbon. That's what it means. What is carbon? Carbon is fossil fuels, stuff that has been living in oceans or on land, and then oceans came and then things got compressed, and the thing that we're finding now is in the form of, let's say, coal or oil or gas. That's what fossil fuels are, and coal and gas, and that's what we now pump out of the ground and we burn it. That's fossil fuels. There's nothing wrong with that in a sense that we don't necessarily condemn it. It is what we did. In 1850 or so, we invented it. We found oil, the first big oil find in Pennsylvania, and then from there we went on and we became an oil carbon consuming civilization as a global society on Earth. There's nothing wrong with that, but what we at Orange Capital Partners are trying to do with our investments is to find better ways to fuel our economies. This is all we're trying to do. On top of that, we're seeing now with Russia that decarbonizing energy also happens to have a very nice side effect, which is de-Russianizing the global economy. Let's not be dependent on people like Vladimir Putin if we can. Now, of course, decarbonizing energy could also mean that we become dependent on certain raw materials that end up being even more centralized, and then we're back in that same situation like with Putin. But let's, again, we're in a sort of David Deutschian spirit. All we're trying to do is we're saying we want to step on the path of knowledge creation. We want to substitute something with a better solution, and hopefully it gets us to an innovation stack that is better and better and better. This is the hope. We could be wrong, but we only have one life and one purpose and one thing we can do at a time. And this is what we're doing at Orange Capital Partners. So very important, we are not trying to solve the environment problem. We're trying to decarbonize energy with our investments, particularly in Tesla. There's other investments we have. We're also working on solutions, for example, digitizing discovery, in other words, using quantum computers for material science. So those are all things along the same trajectory. Let's find better ways to iterate, generate knowledge in order to solve the problem of how to decarbonize the global energy and transport infrastructure. This is the core of our fund. It's not the only thing. We have SynBio and CRISPR and things like that. I don't want to talk about this right now. It's a very small position relative to our Tesla position. And I wish we had more positions along the digital discovery path. That would be great, but we don't. We haven't been able to find companies that are on the trajectory of delivering value to customers at lower cost, which is what wealth really means, wealth creation, excuse me. So having, let's say, an academic chair that does quantum computing and quantum simulation for material science is great, but it doesn't generate wealth. So we need to find an entrepreneur, in other words, that can do that. We haven't found that yet, but we're working on that. So this episode, the purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund. So this is a very important episode because it is one of those episodes where we reminisce about what we're doing right now and why we're doing what we're doing. And I can only recommend, and this is advice. This is advice. So I always put the disclaimer that we're not giving investment advice, but we're happy to give advice in terms of how to do what you're doing. So this is a meta advice. I'm not telling you what to invest in, but I'm telling you how to think about it. And please, every now and then, sit down and just ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? And why? And if once I have an answer to that, is it the right thing? So if we really want to decarbonize energy, are the things we're working on really going to lead us there? Yes, we're taking a course in quantum machine learning. We're working on computer architecture, 2 courses we're taking right now, which are, I would say, almost directly related to the problem of decarbonizing energy through computation, because computation allows for the necessary iteration at speed, of course, with Moore's law on your back, to get fast results and hopefully gets us to a better energy and transport infrastructure. So to summarize, the environment question is not the question we're asking. We're not after solving the problem of the environment because the problem of the environment is a bad problem. We're after decarbonizing energy and transport. This is what we're after. And the way we're doing it is we have a big investment in Tesla because Tesla is doing a lot of things to decarbonize and, by the way, de-Russianize energy also. So also free us from hostage-taking dictators like, let's say, Putin. And we're also working on other ideas, in particular quantum computing, quantum annealing, finding solutions to problems such as material science that can then help us, let's say, develop better solar panels and better batteries, a better transmission technology for electricity, and a lot of things along those lines, which we believe are necessary to decarbonize energy and transport. Thank you.